Welcome back to Unplug with Mel. In our last episode, we had the pleasure of diving into the incredible journey of Bruce Waller, a true motivator and advocate for living a life of significance. If you haven't heard it yet, be sure to catch up and be inspired. But the excitement of this launch continues on as we unveil our next guest, Randy Anderson, the E3 professional trainer extraordinaire. In our upcoming episode, Randy and I take a deep dive into a candid conversation, unplugging from the noise to discuss adversity, leadership, family, success, and so much more. Stay tuned. We hope this encourages you to tell your story and inspire infinite growth. You can watch us on YouTube, hear us on Apple, Spotify, and iHeartRadio. Unplug with Mel. We're here today with another special guest, Randy Anderson, the one and only. I'm so glad we got to meet. There can only be one Randy Anderson, right? I'm pretty sure someone else has your name.
Most people would probably say that's a good thing.
Yeah, probably so. We're here today to talk about Unplug with Mel because it's to tell your story and inspire infinite growth. And Randy has a story to tell, and I can't wait for us to get to that part. You can find us on YouTube, and you can also listen to the audio through Spotify and Apple. And we're launching pretty soon from the HR Southwest Conference, and you're speaking today. And so I love the fact that we keep bumping into one another.
Crossing paths.
And that allowed me to reach out to you to explain what I've been working on for the last few years to actually get this launch and to see if you would tell your story, because briefly we've been able to
hear bits and pieces of it.
Yep. And so I would like for you just to tell people who you are, where you're coming from, your work, your community, your projects. What do you do with E3 professional trainers?
Yeah, so E3 kind of becomes a lot of the answer to a lot of those questions. So my wife and I, Kathy, started E3 in 2005, so we're just over 18 years into this. It's just the two of us at this point. I'm kind of the front person and she's the back end, so she does all the accounting, all the marketing, all the travel arrangements, all that kind of stuff. Everybody loves her. When you said a minute ago there's only one Randy Anderson, that's what I'll say. You'd love to have 10 of those, but one of me is probably plenty. We have 3 kids. I have a 26-year-old who lives in the Dallas area. I have a 22-year-old that just finished school actually, and she stayed in Lubbock, and then I've got a senior in high school, a 17-year-old. Very actively involved in our church, and then also with our kids' school for one more year. As far as activities, I hate to say it, I'm gone so much that when I'm in town, I kind of like to be at home. Mm-hmm. And so my activities and my involvement often comes when I'm on the road with other companies and doing some various stuff. Some of my regular customers even, I'll do some things with them, that are kind of community-based. But, really church and school has kind of been our point of belonging there. And, as far as what I like to do, I'll play golf with somebody if they don't mind me kicking the ball back into the fairway or picking it up from 10 feet out, but I'm not any good at it. Our real hobby is probably travel, which, you can't do that all the time. And as much as I travel for work, we don't travel all the time for play, but we enjoy doing that and just going seeing new places and that kind of stuff. And
your guys are out of
live in Lubbock, yep. Yeah. Live in Lubbock in West Texas, yes.
But you're not quite empty nesters.
Right.
So, but that's on the horizon.
It's close, yeah. We had an experience, I guess 2 weeks ago. We left him alone by himself for the first time, and Kathy went on one of my work trips with me and got himself out of bed every morning for school on time and got there. And then we had another one just the other day. She was gone for some personal stuff with her parents, and 6:56 a.m. he sends us a text that shows on the underarm wrap he had already run 3 miles. And then he went and mowed a lawn before he went to school. He mows yards. Went looked at another yard, gave pricing on that to my daughter who works for a property management company, and he mows for them. And then went to breakfast, and then came home and showered and did a paper. And then he went to lunch with a younger kid he's mentoring. All before he didn't have to be at school that day till 1 because of some unusual circumstances. But we said the other day in Sunday school, he actually does better when we're not in town than he does when we are in town. So I guess he's ready for college. He's trying to prove that he's ready for college.
That independence and that he can do it, which what a great motivation for him to show, hey, Mom, Dad, I'm okay.
Yeah, now when we're at home, he won't get himself out of bed for anything. The other day, he slept through his alarm for an hour, including a moment when I actually went and woke him up, and he looked at me and talked to me, but he never even turned the alarm off, and he fell back asleep again. So
I'm tired.
I'm at the point I'm letting him suffer through the consequences. If you're late, you're late. It's you got to pay the consequences.
My kids are younger, and I'm the same way. Yeah. But I have put Alexa in my house.
Yeah.
Everywhere. and it has the capability routines. So in the morning, it turns off the alarms, and it says, Oliver, get up, go take the dogs out, feed them, get dressed, come see mom.
There you go.
And then my daughter says, Mavis, I know you don't like the morning, sweetheart, but you got to get up.
And is it your voice or Alexa's voice?
It's Alexa voice.
Okay,
So they'll listen to Alexa.
Gotcha.
Because beforehand, it would be me. Come on, guys, let's go. Find the missing shoe. Because mine are younger. The younger ones are 10, and she just turned 8 last weekend. And so I was turning into that angry, yelling mom.
Yes.
I'm like, I'm not that type of person.
Yeah, disruptive morning routine. That's not a good thing.
No, and so thank God for Alexa.
Yeah.
And I don't know where I heard from it to do it, but then I was like, they had a Black Friday sale or whatever, so I bought one for each room, and it echoes throughout the whole house. You cannot tell me you did not hear it.
Yes, right, exactly. That's not an excuse.
But I'm hoping it encourages them that independence, because my son has now gotten on a routine that if he hears that, he gets up, he lets the dogs out, he feeds them, he comes in, he makes his breakfast, whatever it is, if I've got it set out, or sometimes I make them oatmeal or whatever, and then he'll go get dressed, and then he'll be like, okay, Mom, I'm done, I've got my backpack, can I have like 30 minutes on my phone?
Yeah.
And I'm like, hey, you've got 30 minutes.
You got your task done, yeah.
And then my daughter's still not out of bed yet.
Yes, right.
She is not the morning person.
There's always a mixture for sure.
But I'm hoping to see what that is in 8 years when they're ready to
go off on their own.
Well, thank you for telling us about yourself. The first question that I lead into this podcast with is more of the key parts of the journey that you've been on overall. And share some key moments or experience that really shaped who you are today, that maybe brought E3 into the presence that it is now.
Yeah, so you'll hear woven throughout this mentions of my faith. My faith's a big part of who I am, and my relationship with Jesus Christ kind of guided a lot of what we've done. I spent one of my friends, he'll always talk about my first life, he'll say my first life, my second life. So first half of my career in the advertising business. And the great part about that is you work with every single kind of business you can think of. Mm-hmm. And it's really kind of funny. People if we do our job right from the advertising, they'll tell you everything. Mm-hmm. They tell you how much money they're making, and they tell you how much they're selling, and they tell you how much it costs for employees and how much it costs for they tell you profit margin. That's bad, because then when you go buy something, you know how much they're marking it up.
Yep.
So it kills you to know how much you're paying for that. But so I spent 15 years in the advertising business. Started in college actually, and I wasn't an advertising major, but I was close to it. I was an ag comm major, which was really new at Tech when I got there at Texas Tech. And so that really gave me the opportunity to understand business and also people. Being in sales, you got to get where you understand people pretty well.
Yeah.
By the time it was over, so I was working for a company. It was a locally owned company in Lubbock, and we had, I think, 6 radio stations and 3 TV stations. And I was doing all the training for the salespeople. And that's kind of what evolved into this. And then kind of a key moment, you may have heard of a book, and it's getting older now, but it was called Purpose Driven Life and 40 Days of Purpose by a guy named Rick Warren out of California. And
I read it.
And so I always laughingly say it took me 90 days to go through 40 Days of Purpose, because I'm a slow reader. And during that time when we were walking through that book, my wife and I were going together, God kind of put it in my heart, okay, this is what I want you doing. And I kind of always thought I might do this as a retirement career. When I was 55, 60, 65, might be the last part of my career. And at 37, had the opportunity to start doing it. And I asked the question, you've probably heard me ask this question before in front of a group, just kind of a speed dating icebreaker. Mm-hmm. What would you do if you didn't do what you do?
Yes.
This is always what I said I would do if I wasn't in the advertising business. So at 37, I got to do, what I thought I was, hey, if I won the lottery and money was no object anymore, this is what I would do, and got to be able to do that much earlier in my career than I thought. And so that was a real pivotal key point, as far as getting my brain ready for the idea of maybe I'm not going to be in the advertising business forever. Maybe that's not going to be quite so far down the road, when I start into the training and speaking and that kind of business. And key points, I think anybody in my business would tell you that 08 was a pivotal point. A lot of people in my business became realtors in 08 and 09 because the bottom just fell out of the economy. COVID comes along, and that certainly changed things a lot, where we couldn't be in groups of 200, 300, 2,000, 3,000, even groups of 20 or 30. And so that really, my practice, my business, whatever you want to call it, really began to involve a lot more coaching, one-on-one coaching. So executive coaching or key people coaching or promotable individual or we've got somebody who's good at their job, but they're not good at people. We need somebody to kind of help them with that.
Oh, wow.
That really kind of got traction and took off during COVID. And it's not as big as it was in 20 or 21, but it's still a major part. Yeah, it's still a major part. And, before COVID, I would say it was probably 5 or 10% of my business. During COVID, it became 65 to 80% of my business with some, virtual Zoom trainings in there, which nobody loves those. People can say they like, and what they like is that they can do email while they're listening to getting their CEUs.
Yeah.
It's what I'm kind of against the virtual training model if there's any way around it. So
in person has the pros and cons, and but virtual definitely. I've enjoyed meeting him. To circle back into this part where I know Randy is in 2022 at the beginning of the year, I became program chair through Permian Basin SHRM, which we're here at the HR Southwest, which is part of the Dallas HR and Texas SHRM's event here, and the group that I came on with, when I began to look out for speakers to come to our lunch and learns or to our annual conference that we host, that was what the program chair did. So I got to reach out through Michelle Harmon, and a few other referred you to me. Right. And then I'm like, okay, if you give me his info, I'll reach out to him. Oh no, I'll reach out to him. I'm like, no, let me make my introduction. Yeah. He needs to know who I am. And so I did, and you were just, I'll come back. And I think this year's conference that we did, we had elevated it to at the Bush Convention Center. Right. We had 3 keynote speakers. You were our opener. And we chose you as opener because you get us moving. So you did ask that question on that conference because it makes you think. Yeah. What would you be doing if you know? And
I look at it sometimes and I'm like, let me ask you, what would you do if we were on a barter system instead of a monetary economy? If you were just trading your goods and services for somebody else's goods and services, what would that be for you? And I heard a guy who's in my world, he's pretty famous. He's an incredibly good keynote speaker. And even he talked about when he first got started that he did trade with an orthodontist for his kids' braces and did some stuff for his for that practice. And I did a lot of that too, printed business cards on trade and some different things like that. So
that's a good
I mean, if we were on a barter society and money, and it wasn't about quote unquote money, what would you do? And that may give you some direction in life. So there's kind of a sidebar tidbit for you there.
Yeah, that's a really good part because it kind of segues into our next one that I'm going to talk about here, which is when we tell our story. Sometimes we kind of be grander with it, and you want to tell all the good parts, the bits of it, or whatever. But this podcast is unplugging and telling about a pivotal setback that you challenged, or you and your wife challenged, or even in your career that you challenged, not just like with COVID or anything like that, but you faced along the way. And the key part is, how did you overcome them?
Yeah, so I guess the most pivotal one for what we're talking about today, obviously, I'd gone through. That's it. I went through the 40 days of purpose and a purpose-driven life. Got to the end of that summer. It's a 45-minute or an hour and a half long story to tell. I won't tell that whole thing here, but there was a undeniable, tangible conversation I had with God, which may sound funny to people who are not people of faith or whatever, but I mean, it was as real as me sitting here talking to you, and at that moment I knew it was time for me to start doing this. And so went home and I told Kathy kind of what was on my heart. She said, I really been feeling like that's probably what we're supposed to be doing too. Within 2 weeks I got fired from my job.
Wow.
And Kathy was 5 months pregnant at the time with our 3rd kid. So that's not an ideal circumstance, right?
No, not at all.
And, I just, it's kind of hard when it's hard to be mad when she broke up with you before you could break up with her. I had already printed business cards. I had already taken a couple of days of vacation and done subcontract training, felt the fulfillment in that and knew I wanted to do it long term. And so, but it sped up our timeline quite a bit. And as far as, probably wouldn't have done it with a wife 5 months pregnant, probably would have retired a little bit of debt before we jumped off into that. But that became, the pivotal moment in my career because I'm very, very, very risk averse. And I come from a family, there are no entrepreneurs in my family whatsoever.
So this is new to you.
Oh, it's brand new to me. My dad and mom worked for the school district their whole career. Their dads, one of them worked for the power company and one of them worked for a plumbing company as a purchasing.
So stable.
Like, there was no entrepreneurial spirit in our family whatsoever. So that was difficult for me to ever think I would come to the point where I would walk away from a great job with great benefits, great pay, and just say, hey, I'm going to go try something new, and so our faith is kind of what walked us through that. We knew that was probably what we needed to do. We just didn't know that was the time we needed to do it. And if you're doing something and you know for a fact you're in the right spot, you know for a fact you're on the right path, it's a whole lot easier to walk it than you are if you're just walking blind. And so, in as much as I wouldn't have scripted it that way, and your pride gets hurt a little bit. I mean, I got fired from a job because of some circumstances. I was a witness to a sexual discrimination claim. And so everybody who was involved got fired. No witnesses. There's no murder, right? They just got rid of everybody who was involved with it. But it turned out great. That was 18 years ago, and now certainly we're in a different place now. There were some days where we were eating stuff that we had to get pretty creative on grocery buying and stuff like that.
There's many ways that you can make ramen taste delicious.
Yes, right. And so, and with little kids and going through that, but looking back, I don't think I'd trade any of it, because I think all of it has kind of led us to where we are now. And the full version kind of gives me a great story to tell. And so, I delivered a presentation I've been thinking about for really 13 years. Our oldest kid almost died when he was 13 years old. He got a staph infection, was in the hospital, he was in a coma for 5 days. He was in the hospital 22 days. And I look at some of those things and the title of the presentation, so you said we want to focus on the good stuff. The title of the presentation is, if you had any bad days to celebrate lately. Yeah. And I talk about how in life, really when you look back on life, most of the big pivotal moments, many of them come from a bad circumstance and not a great circumstance.
Exactly.
It was something that could have just derailed us. And, again, I wouldn't have chosen it. But looking back, I mean, it certainly bonded our family together and increased our faith and gave us a story to tell. I can relate to people who are going through pretty tough times because, we live, quite honestly, I mean, in spite of all that's going on with wars and COVID and that, we live at a pretty easy time, quite honestly. And so to have, that story to tell and to have the adversity to say, yeah, I understand what it's like to go through that. I feel like it kind of helps me when I'm at the front of the room training, when I'm across from somebody coaching or whatever. And I may not have had the same experience you had, but I understand adversity if you're going through adversity.
Yes, and there's the difference between having sympathy for someone versus having empathy for them.
Right.
Because you can be sympathize with them, but until you go through adversity, now it kicks in your empathy.
Yeah.
Like your story versus my story and anyone else's story out there, it's a platform for you to realize that not everything looks like, you have a bad day or a bad life, but really all those good days are good days. You don't, you can pick out the exciting things.
And we tend to take those for granted.
We do. But the bad, or like you've been saying here, you wouldn't have chosen it.
Yeah.
The non-chosen days, what shifted into that? What changed the alignment? Having a child be sick, or several other things. Excuse me. But it's just amazing how those significant setbacks encourage us and set us into being overcomers. And in that, thank you for sharing that, though.
Yeah, and one more I would say, I mean, even doing what I do, and I'm kind of a technophobe, I'm looking at all the stuff you've got set up here to just video this, and I'm a technophobe, and so COVID comes along, and if I don't learn how to do a webinar pretty proficiently, I'm going to be out of business pretty quick. And COVID didn't affect our family. We had a couple of people who actually passed away. My dad had a very close friend who passed away from it. But as far as Kathy and I, we didn't have much. But it certainly caused me to have to realize, okay, I can make excuses, or I can produce results. I can find a way to work around things, and that was good for my stability-minded, security-minded. Let's do everything the way we've always done everything mindset. And just to begin to, and we had already done some webinars, but it was, we laugh and joke now. I feel like now, since COVID, I've kind of gotten a PhD in Zoom. I still feel like I'm working on a GED in Teams. I tell people I'm gonna charge them combat pay if they make me use Teams, but and this there's no paid sponsorship for this, but either one of the Zoom or whatever. But if you'd like to, I still I look at it and I'm like, man. And so in 2018, I had a heart attack, and it was about as mild a heart attack as you could possibly have. I kid you not, I could have driven myself to the emergency room. I got to the emergency room. They told me, okay, their statement was a cardiac event. So whether it was heart failure or heart attack or whatever, there was something. I had basically a heart attack. I had a very, very, very mild heart attack. They had to transfer me from there to the hospital. I literally could have driven myself. I mean, I'm not kidding. I was fine at that point. But through that, Kathy, who is very non-confrontational, very kind, very sweet, very nice. I'm in the hospital, just got stents put in my heart, and she goes, I'm just going to tell you, I'm going to start being a butthead about you creating alternate forms of income. And so that's the kind of the advent of the webinars came in 18.
Yeah.
So then, and we still laugh that there were literally times when I'm such a technophobe, I've got the computer set up and I'm staring into the camera and she's handing me Post-it notes off to the side saying, you need to click on this or you need to do that, because she didn't want to come around and be on camera. And so by the time 20 came, we had done a bunch and I was able to do that. And that's what kind of kept it. And it allowed me to be able to stay in business, because there was no meeting with groups. There was no meeting with large crowds for sure for quite a long time. I mean, my first engagement if I remember correctly, my first engagement back was in that August. I went to Kansas and worked with a nonprofit. They went to a small college there, and we had like 25 people in a 300-seat auditorium, and everybody was spread out as far as they could get. And that was a weird dynamic, to try to bounce back from that. But I said to you off camera a minute ago, and I think it was off camera, a lot of people in my world became realtors, in that year, in 20 and 21. And so to be able to stay in it, required me to I had to experience that negative to be able to keep with the positive. So.
Yesterday, we had our opening keynote speaker here at HR Southwest was Morris Morrison, and his two takeaways towards the end of it stuff. He was like, commitment is inconvenient, and so is disruption.
Yeah.
And so, COVID was a disruption.
Very much.
And
probably for most of us, probably the biggest disruption we've had, except for personal events.
But for the corporate world and everyone's jobs, you're in person. Now we got to see if we can make all our staff go remote. And you're not the only technophobe out there at all. So it's almost like, can we teach, it wasn't just even old dogs new tricks. It was everyone, how to be able to be conscious of their time, log in. Does it work? Is the camera's good or whatever? Because the work had to go on.
Yeah.
Or because we know several companies didn't make it through.
Yeah, and I would get frustrated because I'm so big on personal excellence and do your best and try your hardest and find something you love so that you don't have to make yourself go to work. And I heard stuff as silly as one person told me they figured out if they filled up a shot glass or a small liquor glass with just enough water, they could set it on the space bar, that it would click that space bar every so often and make it look like they were doing work. And I'm like, if you would put as much effort into doing your work as you did to figuring out how to not do your work, imagine how productive you could be.
Wow. And that's a segue to what I learned in this, to launch a side gig like a podcast. I was a mindless scroller on social media.
We spend a lot of time doing nothing.
TikTok or whatever. But my youngest son and stuff is now has his own cell phone. But I was parental controlling the sucker. Like I can see everything he does on it. And because he has to do homework on stuff like that. So like getting to the digital world with my kids, when I'm not a technophobe, I just don't want my kids so accessible to it.
Right.
So the iPhone, and no sponsorship either, but if you want to reach out, was that they do the sharing of time, and you can limit social media. Like
it just turns it off.
Turns it off, like even YouTube or whatever.
Right.
And so I did that for him, and I got so convicted because my faith too, that I looked at it gives me a status report, and I was spending so many hours, and it tells you how much was on social media, and I was like,
your screen time was up 50% last week and things like that.
Yes. And so I looked back and I was like, wow, how can I give those hours back? Like, really, I'm wasting this much. I'm not very intentional. So I put it on my phone. And so when it says I spent 2 hours on social media, and I don't get back off. Yeah. I don't get back on. And I've held myself accountable all of 2023.
Wow,
and
that's awesome.
What time has that done?
Here you sit. Yeah.
Here I sit. Yeah. And being intentional with it and everything. And everyone that was going through COVID and through a setback, they had to be very intentional what they were going to do with their career, with their money, with their children, with school and education.
And the way we managed changed, the way that we try to engage people changes, the understanding I have for, okay, your kids are in the other room trying to do 7th grade math. and somebody else doesn't have kids or something like that, and so there's a challenge. And what Mel just said, and I'll just talk straight to you guys who are with us today. A couple things you can take from that. Number one, don't be guilty of what frustrates you at work, at home, whatever the case may be. Don't be guilty of what frustrates you. And then the second thing, and you've probably heard me say this in one of my presentations, you should demonstrate excellence before you demand it from others.
Oh, yes.
And if we're not giving that, if we're not doing that, if we're not pushing ourselves to that point, is it really fair to ask employees or team members or whoever else to do that? And so that's kind of two of my big mantras.
How can I ask my son to get off his phone when I wouldn't?
Right.
Oh, yeah. Yes, yeah. Perfect. Well, we've said a lot in this just short term, real quick, of what setbacks are and and then challenges. But you couldn't have gone through that like putting a neat little bow on it, like a little, it's so perfect and tight. But there was some doubt and failure in there, wasn't it?
Yeah, I mean, the doubt, I don't know as much of it was doubt as just unpredictable, unforeseeable, the unknown, and you just keep stepping forward, and I've always heard the example, you just drive to the end of the headlights. I can't see what's past the end of the headlights, but I drive to the end of the headlights, and then the headlights go a little further. I drive to the end of the headlights, and the headlights go a little further. I'm going to have a late night tonight. I'm flying out of Dallas and flying to Tulsa, and I've got to drive out to this resort on the lake, and I've never been there before. I think it's going to be kind of a wooded area, which from West Texas, we don't have wooded areas.
We do not.
So I'm not used to trees everywhere, and just drive to the end of the headlights. And so, I guess the thing, and again, I'm going to come back to my faith, and I know this is not a, necessarily a spiritually based podcast, but my life, if you pull the spiritual part out, you don't have much left. I mean,
Well, this is unplugging with Mel and stuff, and you can't take part of you away to tell your story.
And it'd be like if you took water out of the body. They say that what if the water is like 70 some odd % of the human body or whatever. But I think it's just I don't know that I had doubt. I mean, I had some trepidation. I mean, and I guess I've got a little bit of a security anxiety. I just want to be able to provide. I can live cheap. Like I can live on nothing, but I don't want my wife and I don't want my kids to have to do that necessarily. And so to be able to provide for them, and to be able to, pay tuition and to be able to do those kind of things, that doubt and fear, I mean, it's going to either drive you crazy or it's going to drive you to faith, and for me, it drove me to faith even more and more, which had always been a big part of my life. But, and I've seen, and I've said, I can't believe I'm fixing to say this on camera with microphone running. Our daughter had actually been in the hospital for about a week a year before Clayton got sick, and with a staph infection also. So that's kind of too long to tell the medical side of that deal, but we're not, negligent parents. I'll just say that. It's just two weird circumstances. We were still paying hospital bills for her when Clayton got sick. And then, for a year and a half after that, we're getting medical bills. And after he came home from the hospital in early August, really that kind of extended on all the way through. We were giving him medicine through a PICC line, if you know what that is, kind of an IV that goes in the arm and puts medicine to the heart 3 times a day at 7 a.m., 3 p.m., 11 p.m. So one of us is having to get up early to do that. One of us is having to stay up late to do that because you started at 11, what's not through till midnight, but you got to get up at 6 a.m. to pull one of the little medicine balls out of the refrigerator to let it get up to room temperature by 7. The medical part of it, we basically closed down our business for a month while he was in the hospital. And this is the part I can't believe I want to say on camera. I had never, ever, ever thought about it. And I still never have. Never, ever, ever thought about suicide. But for the first time ever, I could see how someone who doesn't have the faith I have and who doesn't have the peace that brings could think, I just got to get a way out. And so to again, I don't know that I would say doubts as much as uncertainty, and I'm hesitant to say fear because I don't know that I was fearful because I knew I was on the right path and I didn't know what that path was going to hold, but I knew I was in the right spot for where I was supposed to be at that time. Really made that a whole lot easier for me than it would somebody who doesn't have that. And and I'll just tell you, I mean, you didn't ask me to say this, and I hope I don't get taken off the air and shut down the cameras. But I mean, if you want to know more about that, I'm happy to talk with you about the spiritual side of my life and my faith and what that means, what that could mean to you as well.
Well, that's just. Thank you for sharing that. That is very personal and very raw, but that's exactly what this podcast is for, because it brings the humanity back into us, that we are not. Our platform isn't to show that we have all the answers or the experience or whatever. It's just to say that we've taken our tools that we have learned along the way. and we want to tell you guys about them so that it influences you. I always say, when you know better, you do better.
Yeah.
And from my experience in that part, just hearing your story encouraged me. And my faith has been an outstanding source of everything that's been allowed in my life.
Well, and we hear about AI and we hear about robots and everything.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't care how many jobs the AI and robots take over. People are still going to need people.
Yeah.
And people are still going to need somebody to care about what's going on in their life. And the robots can't do that.
No.
We've got to care about the people we work with, people we serve, vendors, customers, as well as team members.
Exactly.
And how we can do that in the workplace to really help people just make it through a tough circumstance. Because that's one thing I have figured out. I mean, I'm 55 years old, and I figured out quite a long time ago, everybody's battling something.
Mm-hmm.
It's either finances or marriage has gone bad or their kids off the rails or midlife crisis or lack of fulfillment or health problems or whatever. Everybody's battling something.
There's a bucket of it, yeah.
And so if we don't take that into consideration and all I focus on is my problems, well, then the world gets to be a pretty lonely place at that point.
Yeah, and everyone can be holding themselves up from the very bootstraps
Sure.
of them and putting on a smile, and they're not going to tell you their story right there in a second, but if you take the time to pause and check in,
connect with them,
and connect, and you'll know then that, hey, I just have you on my heart. I think there's something you're going on. Like, let's take some time.
Yeah.
And then you're showing them that they're valued, that you see them, and you're taking that one-on-one or whatever. And but I appreciate you sharing what you just shared. I know you won't be kicked off the air. I want to switch into giving some hope and everything like that. What advice would you give for those looking to tell their own stories or pursue their passions? Maybe they're in that crossroad of trepidation and they don't know where they're headed, but encouraging them to keep on and look forward to the journey of it all.
Yeah, as far as sharing your passion or demonstrating your passion, you might not want to get fired from one thing and start cold turkey. You might want to make a transition during that point. But I would just say, look for what brings you fulfillment. Patrick Lencioni's got a book called 6 Types of Working Genius, and in that he talks about some stuff we're great at, some stuff we don't love it, but we're good at, and other stuff we hate.
Yes. And
if I can figure out what I like to do and find a way to do that in your job, and people are like, well, I've got a secure job and it's a bad economy and whatever else. I just think if you can find something you really love, whether you become self-employed or whether you go to work in a different industry, you hear so many people who, something clicked and halfway through their career, they shifted. And you said it earlier, you went into a nonprofit and worked there for a while. And when I talk to people who love work, most of them are doing something they really enjoy. When I talk to people who hate work, they're doing something they're capable of that pays the bills.
And nothing outside of that.
Nothing outside
I mean, if you can love security the best you want and stability, I'm one of the ones too that I like to know where everything's coming from. But if my job is good and that's where I am for the season with my growth plan or whatever, then I look into volunteerism or what I'm doing in the community or what I'm doing in my church, what am I doing with my children to spark that joy and that commitment and that, sometimes a job is a job, but it doesn't have to be the end of the game with it. Yeah,
and I mean, I understand that responsibilities are real and bills are real, and I get that life can't, just be all fun and games, but was it Henry Ford? I can't remember who it was. Find something you love and you never have to work another day in your life.
Yes,
I can't think who
Henry
that was.
Ford.
And, I mean, I love what I do. Now, I don't love days when I send out 100 emails and nobody emails me back. I don't love days when I make, 15 phone calls and nobody returns. But I love, I'll be in front of an audience this afternoon sharing something I think can make their life better. And I love that. I really find true enjoyment in that and fulfillment in that. As far as what was the first part of that question? Was about the hope? Is that right? Is that
the hope? Inspiring them to, what advice would you give them to actually open up and tell someone their story, not keep it all in?
Well, and telling your story. I mean, don't let your story end. Let your story keep growing, right? Yeah. And I heard somebody the other day, so kind of a churchy word is testimonial.
Yes.
Testimony. I heard somebody say their kid has kind of gone off the deep end in a lot of ways. I won't go into details here, but the mom's statement was she's working on her testimony right now, and I thought that's she's
claiming it.
And then the mom's hope is that at some point she's going to come back around to normalcy and be able to tell a story about when she kind of got out there on the fringes.
Yeah.
I just think, to be looking and going, what's next? Not what's more of the same, not what's 42 years of going to work and drudgery and I can't wait. I knew a guy, he worked for me. He was much older than me, and he worked for me back in the early 2000s. And I don't know that I've ever known of anybody who looked forward to retirement more than he did. He was a fun-loving guy, great personality. He loved being married to his wife. He was just fun. Couldn't wait to retire. He retired, and I think within 2 months, he developed a blood disorder, a blood infection. Was in the hospital for I think close to a month and had to go back to work to pay the hospital bills and died. So he was retired for a total of about 2 months, and he eventually died from it. And so don't wait until retirement to love life. Don't wait until 60 to do what you always wanted to do. If you want to be a Walmart greeter, that's okay to wait a little while on that. But if there's something that you're passionate about and you want to do, look, if you love it enough and you're passionate about it enough, you'll figure out a way to make it work.
That's some good advice there, Randy. The last part of this, of the serious questions before we really get to have some fun and unplug,
all right.
is a chance for you to talk about the support and the guidance in your journey, the mentors, the colleagues, the family, even the church. Who played a significant role in providing you wisdom and support in your life. And what makes them so important to you?
Well, that list is long, and I ask that question sometimes when in a couple of my different modules that I do on life balance and on life goals and stuff like that. And I'll see people who, I'll ask the question, hey, write down 5 or 6, 7 people that have really been influenced, and they're just stumped. And I'm like, if you don't realize who's had an impact in your life, you're not paying attention, because there's a lot of people who've done a lot for you. I look at a high school ag teacher who really. High school was not a great memory for me. I've never been to a class reunion. I was always with the in crowd because they needed somebody to push in the pool or somebody to pants at McDonald's or that kind of deal. Today we would call it bullying back then it was just part of the gig,
Just part of the game.
But he saw something in me, a youth director at church at that point in time, that I still remember a sentence he said to me, as I was about to leave and go to college, and he said, I think you're going to find once you get out of this town, life's going to be very different for you, and you're going to do really well. I had another guy that was a mentor to me. I worked for him for probably 9 years, and I still remember a sentence he said. We were conversing about something one day, and he goes, you just don't realize how special you are, do you? And because low self-confidence, because low self-esteem from getting pushed in the pool or whatever the case may be, those sentences made a huge difference. And I don't know that I would have looked back and thought of those people at that moment with the title mentor, but they certainly impacted my life deeply. I had a teacher in high school who she had been a speech teacher in the past. She was not a speech teacher at that time, and I was in a speaking contest, and within FFA, if people know what that is. And needless to say, the ag teacher was not the public speaker professional. And so he got this lady to come and help me before and after school. She was a teacher at the school. And one thing I always say about Miss Loop, she never made me feel like I wasn't good enough, but she always made me feel like I could be better.
Oh, I love that.
She never made me feel like I was an idiot or an underperformer, but she always made me believe I could be better.
So she didn't make you on the top of the world or the mountain.
Right.
She kept you real.
Right.
But she knew she could do more.
I would get through giving my speech, and she was the coolest teacher ever. She was an old maid, never been married, but she was the coolest teacher in the school. Not quite honestly, she wasn't very physically attractive. She was just cool.
Yeah.
She was just cool. Wore is it poplin khaki skirts, the straight just press skirts every single day, the longest. Just kind of an old maid. She was the coolest teacher in the school, and I'd get through with my speech, and she'd go, Anderson. All right, now let's talk, and she was like, that was good, but we can make this better. And ended up finished second in the state. And obviously, further down the path here, I'm a professional speaker, right? And I look back, and she had a big impact on me. I had some people when I was in college. I had a guy who was a minister at our church that met with me and kind of mentored another church. He discipled me for about 14 years, almost every week. And he and I are still good friends. In fact, he lives in Fort Worth. He's here in town. I had a business mentor who was also from my church, and he had been a big deal with Procter and Gamble way back, and then he became a realtor, and very much a self-made guy who just believed in biblical principles in the workplace, but also believed in hard work and creativity and be more passionate, and just, you've got potential, but potential by itself is just a good idea. You've got to work at it to make it go. And he was very influential in my life. And so in the front of my Bible, I've got probably 25 names written of people who had a big influence in my life. And I've written letters or talked to all but 2 of them to say thank you, because those 2 died before I made the list. And Miss Loop was one of those people. I wish I could go back and say, hey, Miss Loop, I actually turned out to be something worthwhile. As much of a knucklehead as I seemed to be at that time,
I did do better. I am speaking. I am a professional speaker. Yes. I loved the full circle there.
Yeah.
And I loved that it was a teacher, because
and I would just say, whether you're a teacher, whether you're a coach, whether you're a manager or not, somebody's looking at you, and somebody's learning from you, good or bad. They're picking up little things from you. Look for opportunities to have positive influence and positive. I look at influence as the breadth of the number of people I reach, and the impact is how deeply do I impact them. How deeply into their life am I able to intertwine my life. And man, I just, like I say, if you can't think of the people who are doing that for you, you're just not paying close enough attention. Because once beyond your parents, there's a whole lot of other people who have really given you a lot of their energy and a lot of their heart, and they want to see you do well. And to go back and to say thank you to them, and that's just priceless. Yeah. I've had that with several people where I've had a conversation. Hey, Mel, the reason I wanted to come back was just tell you what you did, and it's good for me and it's good for them.
Oh, it is. In my most recent life, in the transition of going into the nonprofit, I'd have to say my boss is a huge mentor to me, and I don't think he knew quite as much, but he'll come in, and what pivotally made me change to do more, to do better.
Yeah.
When I was first in there, I would make some mistakes along the way, but he says, Mel, you make that mistake once and you never make it again. Like, you learn it and you'll fix it, and you don't make it again. You're intentional.
I don't bumble through the same stuff over and over.
And so he is in between that, it's like he had faith in me.
Yeah.
He knew he could trust me with what my role was, what it was growing into be. But when he said that, when he left my office, I had to write that down.
Yeah.
Because it's his quote to me in a way, but I had to self-reflect on that. Like, I've always kind of been that way. I mean, I'm human. I'm gonna make a mistake, whether it's minor or major.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
But
you just hope it's not too expensive or nobody gets hurt.
Exactly. Yeah. And then I look back and I'm like, yeah, he's right. Whether it be from payroll or an employee relationship issue or whatever, I'll fix it.
Yeah.
And then I won't repeat that. And I've done it in my personal life. I've done it with my children. And I had to hold tight to that, because that's kind of helped me blossom to the next level, all because of my boss, who is one of the best mentors I have.
Well, and that comes, several of those people and sentences they say, you never know when a soundbite is going to almost change the trajectory of somebody's life.
Julie Birch.
Yeah.
2022, last year, here at HR Southwest, I went to her session, and it was funny, because no one knew I was working on side projects or anything, and I had such a really bad anxiety. I'm not really an introvert, but I'm becoming an ambivert. Like, I could go socialize, but once it drained, I'm out.
Yeah.
And but I never could see myself behind a camera, in person, telling anyone anything.
Yeah.
Over the radio, fine.
This
is my voice.
Right.
But hers was professional speaking, like how to do it, and she goes, I do it afraid, I do it scared, I do it nervous, I do it. And it doesn't necessarily, it doesn't matter to me if it's done well, it's whether or not you got the message.
Right.
And she goes, this is awkward. She goes, I was the funny kid, I made a joke out of everything. But that's who I am, and that's how I handled things. And when I wrote everything she was saying, I was writing it down. Right. And when I went back to read it, do it afraid. Do the podcast, do the work, join PB Sherm, join Texas Sherm. And as the 3 years down, I'm not as afraid anymore. I'm coming out of my shell. I'm doing the work, and we'll see where it goes from there. But one person.
Yeah.
Right timing.
One person, one soundbite.
Yeah. And so, but I appreciate you joining this and stuff. So we're gonna have a little fun here.
Okay.
You're a busy guy.
I got to tell you, I hadn't even read the last two questions, so I don't know what you're fixing to ask me. So.
Oh, this is even better.
Yeah, I have no idea. I didn't read that far down.
We're gonna have fun.
Yeah.
You're a busy guy. You travel to speak.
Yeah.
You have 3 kids and a wife and everything. So, what does Randy Anderson do to unplug?
I am so boring, it's incredible. Let me just say that to start with.
You don't look like a boring person.
I am the most boring person, my wife will tell you. I love yard work. You know, a great Saturday for me is just to be, and if it's good weather, is to be outside all day and just mowing my grass, trimming my hedges, you know, pulling the weeds, whatever it may be. And I don't know if it's because, you know, as long as my yard looks better than my neighbor's yard who doesn't know we're in competition, but really they do, right? You know, and as long as, you know, there's no report due and there's no deadline, I really enjoy that. My in-laws live on a ranch, you know, typical stereotypic Texas family. We've got a ranch in the family, and my in-laws live on a ranch. I love being down there and just being out in the openness of that. Love being with my family, you know, and like I say, it's getting down to where it's just me and Kathy most of the time now because the senior in high school, he's gone all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know that this reduces stress. This usually, I joked about this earlier, but I'm a Texas Tech fan, so Texas Tech sports can cause an awful lot of anxiety, but that we have season tickets for that, go to a lot of basketball games, baseball games, and we live in the same town where we went to school, and so that's a fun part of what I do. And that's probably most of it. You know, just, you know, again, I'm boring. I'm not a guy who's going, you know, mountain biking a lot. I cycle quite a bit. I had a pretty bad wreck a couple years ago, kind of slowed me down a little bit. I got 3 fractures out of it and a sprain, but I enjoy doing that. Yeah, it hurt pretty bad. There was a guy on his phone had drifted over on our side of the road, and we came around the corner, and I hit water and went down really hard. But at least I didn't go under the car. At least I didn't go up on top of the car or over the car. So it was a truck to pick up. I didn't get run over, but it reminded me how old I was, that's for sure.
Well, the last one, as we fade out for this, is what piece of advice or the best piece of advice that you've ever received or heard, the soundbite, and how, because you said several, and how did it influence your career and life in general?
I don't know that I realized it at the time. And he meant it about geography.
Ooh.
And not about occupation.
Okay.
But I had a guy one time, so when we've had our first kid, Kathy's parents began to put the pressure on, you need to move closer to us. And so we were looking at other towns and where we might live other than Lubbock, because Lubbock is a long way out in West Texas. And this guy was talking about building a business. And he said, if you're not where you're going to be, then the longer you stay here, you're just wasting time for the future. And what his point was, if you're going to be in sales, you might as well go ahead and get to the town you're going to sell in and start making connections and contacts and all that stuff. He meant it from a geography standpoint.
Yeah.
But I think you can look at it from what you're calling or whatever else.
Yeah.
If you're not where you're going to be, then the longer you stay here, you're just wasting time. And again, I look back in my time in the advertising business, it prepared me to do what I'm doing now. So I'm not going to say it was wasted time.
No.
But if you're thinking, man, as soon as my kids are old enough to go off to school,
that's good.
Or as soon as my kids are old enough to drive, or as soon as my kids graduate, or as soon as I do, and we're always looking further and further and further out. It's easy to think about what might be, but to go make it what is, those are the people that we look back on and go, man, I admire that person. And even if it didn't go great, at least you can say, hey, I tried.
Yeah.
You know, at least I gave it a fighting effort on the deal. And so he didn't mean it as profound. I mean, he probably did think it was profound. At the time I heard it, it was just, you know, I was 28, 29 years old. I was too young to know any better at that time. But looking back, man, that has really proven to be something that's stuck in my brain
all these years.
And you know, here I am, you know, bumping up on 25, 30 years later, and that still rings true of, you know, if there's something I'm going to do. Again, it's kind of cheesy, but the Shawshank deal.
Yes.
Remember what he said? Get busy living or get busy dying.
Oh, that's such a good.
And I'm just like, man, that could be in the career, that could be in parenting, that could be in your marriage, that could be in everything.
Everything. What a good way to end the podcast on Shawshank Redemption.
Well,
I mean, come on.
Get busy dying. That's not the most motivational quote, but I'm a trainer, not a motivational speaker. So.
Well, I hope this has helped you be inspiring to tell your story or to reach out for one-on-one coaching or counseling. It starts somewhere, and if you're struggling in anything, career, personal life, even in a certain thing, leadership development, or just social. For me, I had to be more engaging. I had to come out of my shell, and that took coaching. Like, Mel, why are you so reserved? What stops you? And so the podcast here, I hope that when you hear Randy's story, that it ignites something in you and it inspires infinite growth. And you can hear us again on YouTube, or you see us on YouTube and hear us on Apple and on Spotify. And this will be coming out pretty soon as we recap from HR Southwest. He does speak today, and I'm going to be in there. I'm going to fill his seat. Can't wait to hear what you say. But thank you for saying yes for this project.
Absolutely.
Thank you for coming on. I love it.
And I commend you for doing.
Thank you.
Not just pondering and not just hoping, but doing.
Thank you so much. Well, this is our time, and thank you for joining Unplug with Mel with Randy Anderson.
Thank y'all. Have a great day.